This is Joe Lai. I'm a principal at BGR Government Affairs. I'm a 2001 alumnus of the TFAS Public Policy and Economics program, and I'm a member of the inaugural class of TFAS Public Policy Fellows in 2007. And you're listening to the Liberty and Leadership Podcast.
Hello and welcome. I'm Roger Ream, and this is the Liberty and Leadership Podcast, a conversation with TFAS alumni who are making a real impact in politics, public policy, government, business, philanthropy, law, and the media. Today, it's my pleasure to welcome Mike Caslin to Liberty and Leadership. Mike is a longtime friend and has held many roles in his expansive career, and we'll be talking about that today. Among the many roles he's held is founder and CEO of GCSEN Foundation, a nonprofit educational foundation created to drive social entrepreneurship and strengthen local economies. Through Mike and GCSEN's work, aspiring social venture founders leverage their passion, find their purpose, and create lasting impact that improves the world around them. Mike has worked in business consulting, nonprofits, alongside local, state, and federal government actors, in venture capital, in education, even working here at TFAS as executive director at one point along the way early in his career. Mike was part of the 1978 TFAS public policy class, and his career since then has been nothing short of extraordinary. I'm excited to have him here today to dive deeper into how TFAS shaped his work and the lessons he's learned on liberty and leadership. Mike, thanks for joining me.
Roger, thank you so much. I'm humbled and inspired to be here. Humbled by the range of graduates you've had and inspired by the work you continue to do. Because in a very troubled world we have today, this is one of the few windows of goodness and hope that I know exists for real.
Well, thanks. Never-ending amount of inspiration to be with young people who are the future and who are really driven to make this world a better place. And I know you have that opportunity to work with them every day, and I do too, and it makes me an optimist about the future. I hope it does for you.
Absolutely. And we can win. We can win the battle of ideas with effective action and practical and experiential education that gives this new generation small wins to lead to big wins over time. I just returned from a Fulbright fellowship, first for the Fulbright program and the focus of the rising field of social entrepreneurship. And I really owe it to my grandparents who 100 years ago left Ireland, each at 16 with just a bag. Never to return, sadly, but gave a chance to come to this country and to work our way up and to reach back and help people. So I've always wanted to help people, and I've found that business and social entrepreneurship is a great way to help people discover their social entrepreneur within, and that's basically, who are you, why are you here, what do you know now, and how can you act on it, and then what do you need to know? And by being a social entrepreneur, you can act on the world to make it better. And what we teach our students is we have our team colors or international colors are orange and green, and we Myers-Briggs analysis matched with that. And green is sustainable, strong, and enduring. Orange is bold. It's opportunistic. It's optimistic, and it's generous. And today, so many things have happened to our newest students coming in that oftentimes, as it relates to being generous, they've been isolated, even though they're totally connected via digital media in what I would call non-purpose social media at 6 hours a day. When we get college students, I've taught in higher ed for 14 years, high school in the lowest income, highest crime neighborhoods of the world for 20 years, as well as a self-taught entrepreneur. We get college students now with 10,000 hours of video gaming and 10,000 hours of classroom time. So there's a whole different mindset and learning set and skill set we have to adapt to. So that's what we do. We have private sector sponsors that fund us to innovate around practical, action-based education that students can actually create the next wave of builders, not burning stuff down.
Well, I do want to talk today about the work of GCSEN, work you've done before that's been global in its impact. But let me go back first to that summer many years ago when you, as someone raised in New York City, New York area, New York City, and went to school in New York, came to TFAS program at Georgetown at the time. And I know you had siblings who did the program as well, ahead of you and after you, I think. Tell me what that was like to, take a summer and come down to
Oh,
Washington, D.C.
absolutely. And if I could be vulnerable, which is the new black, the new authentic color, I had been a very intense athlete in high school, and really was conditionally accepted to Harvard and Yale, but I couldn't afford it. And so I wound up working at a gas station after high school. And from there, I got a phone call and was given a New York State Regent Scholarship, which I scored on, to go to Manhattanville College. So
Yeah.
I always wanted to compete with the best. And it looked a little grim pumping gas during a July summer in New York. But we always felt you can outwork everybody, and the only way out is up. My father was in 3 unions. My mother had to forego college to take care of her mother, who was widowed as an Irish immigrant. All 5 of us got through college and beyond degrees. And it's a miracle. It's an American miracle. And I became the first kind of self-taught entrepreneur of the family, because we grew up in a culture that's predominant around the world today. It's an British English education culture, which is a job culture. And that's be good, do good in school, and someone will give you a job. And you'll get good benefits and then retire. There never was a conversation about entrepreneurship, liberty, and passion-driven and purpose-driven work, that you can own your own job as opposed to get a job. So I learned that literally while I had come to the fund, and on a Saturday found a used book called The Spirit of Enterprise.
George Gilder?
Written by George Gilder.
Wow.
And it singularly affected my life. He was a thinker for the Rockefellers. And he talked about that entrepreneurs are the heroes of life, because out of uncertainty, chaos, and destruction, they create more sustainable pathways in life. It's a beautiful quote. And I really started to see that this was an opportunity. When I had the opportunity to apply for the fund, I literally was working 2 jobs and tuition, I think, was maybe I had to come up with $400 a year, and that was still hard stretch. But over that time, getting accepted to the fund was just an amazing thing to hang on, to hope for, and to strive for, to see if I can compete with the best. Certainly the best faculty that the fund got from all over the country. It was to ICPES, the International, the Comparative System, Political and Economic Systems, the Institute for Comparative Political and Economic Systems. And I had 2 great instructors, Professor Vixnens and Professor Buscarin, and ironically from Lemoyne, which ties back. And it boosted my self-confidence. And it also taught me how the world works, how people matter, how people make policy. And I got a chance to intern for a fairly radical congressman at the time named Jack Kemp. He believed that everyone should have a chance in every community to create a better life. And at the time, in the late 70s, he was going against the grain. Number one, he was going against Kenneth Galbraith, because in the Keynesian economics that ruled said that the role of business and small business and entrepreneurship was irrelevant in the late 70s, that it was all global multinationals. Well, Ronald Reagan and the Reagan dream dispelled that and saved the country, in my opinion. I couldn't afford to come here, even though I got in. And the fund paid for my Amtrak ticket. It was a miracle.
That was 1980.
1978.
78.
Yeah.
78.
And I went back. I was my brain was on fire from the fund experience. And I have heard every year since I've taught at higher ed that the students I teach, their brains are on fire. So it's totally the fund's fault for people being ignited. And luckily, we still have the torch of freedom and liberty in the logo of TFAS. And
well, that I find it's fascinating to think that you had Dr. George Vixens, who taught for us for 34 years, and he loved to quote Joseph Schumpeter, who had reached Harvard professor who'd reached the conclusion that capitalism wouldn't survive, was very pessimistic about the future of capitalism. And then to be with Jack Kemp, who just exuded optimism and energy and passion for free
And
enterprise.
inclusion. I mean, he was, it's just being American. It's because I've worked in China. I've been all over the world. I've worked in 14 countries, and most of the systems are set up to be highly elitist. You go to one or two schools. If you go to China and you're not in the top two schools, you're screwed. You're not going anywhere. So it's a very elite structure. The American system, still with all of its challenges, is still opportunistic and inclusive, more inclusive than almost anywhere else. And so I got here. I got the chance to mix it up with the best students in the country. I got a chance to see how policy is made and how people behave positively and negatively. I saw that Washington was real, and then went back. I was so inspired. I fit 2 academic years into one. I took 8 courses a semester, and then literally came to work at the fund the following year with Dave Jones. Who was just a great inspiration, great motivation, great manager. He really believed in guidance and delegation and accountability. And so he would give me a list of 22 things to do, 22 cities to fly to. And this is when Eastern Airlines existed, on the single pass that you can travel to 30 cities in one ticket. And I did that for the fund. I was all over the country raising money from visionary sponsors and helping students get a shot.
Well, let's just for a minute talk about David Jones, because as you know, he was a mentor of mine. I met him when I was a student at Vanderbilt University, and he's the one who encouraged me to apply to TFAS and arranged for me to get a scholarship as well, to be there. Profound influence on me. It was extraordinary. I was telling some students yesterday about him and the fact that when you were with him, he made you feel like you were the most important person in his life. And,
Absolutely.
as a mentor, as someone who gave out career advice, really pushed you to be a critical thinker. He was a remarkable man. And I was proud to succeed him as the TFAS president in 1998 after his too early in life death from cancer. But I assume he had a strong influence on you from what you
100%.
said.
He gave me my first shot. Obviously, Dr. Dobriansky, Dr. Judd, the Union Carbide that sponsored me, and and my sister Mary, who had gone here, and my sister Colleen had encouraged me. But you still had to work your own path, and he made that happen and gave me a shot to come into Washington and to work at the fund as a program director and executive director. And from that, got into an orbit of helping people help themselves through education. And then as I became an entrepreneur, which was different from most, other traditional paths, which was primarily union, fire, police, longshore, sandhog, steam fitter, or be a priest. And I didn't become any of those. I became an entrepreneur. And so that was a bit of a puzzle palace, but that explains some things. And I just felt that I wanted to help people, but helping people the way I saw it wasn't the best way. Helping them the way they see it and helping them act on it is the best way that I've found.
Well, then you went into a career in many different areas. We'll talk about that. And at the end of that, I think everyone listening will understand why not too many years ago we presented you our Alumni Achievement Award for the remarkable things you've done. Let's talk about this organization that I've always had such respect for, that you and your friend Steve Mariotti built up to be a global organization doing good, and that is the Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship.
Right.
Just a great program. Could you say something about that mission and then how you took it global?
Absolutely. I think the perspective is people can either be part of the light or part of the gloom. That's kind of very much from Les Miserables. We're either wisps in the gloom or flames of light. And I had learned the entrepreneurial process, self-taught at the time, and I had modest successes. And then met a teacher in the South Bronx and we basically thought that teaching entrepreneurship to multi-generation welfare families was a great way to break the cycle of poverty by creating wealth. Now, over time, I learned from our students that there's an abundance of wealth in even the lowest income communities of all ethnicities. For example, in South Boston, the highest rate of kind of impoverishment is Irish, white Irish. And then you go across the country, and the big thing that I found was business formation rate per ethnic group is key, but no one talks about it. There's a Dr. Steve Balkin, I found his book, and at Roosevelt University in Chicago, and he basically did the research that said, a Native American young adult has a chance of less than 0.5% to start a business. African American about 1.5, Latino American maybe 2.5, Anglo-Euro American about 6, and this is all out of 100 adults, 6 out of 100. Asian American out of about 10 out of 100, and Russian immigrant is about 12 out of 100. And as you have that percolation and that multiplier of trade, you have an expansion of value. When you have less of it, it creates this downward cycle. Now, we're talking about hope and future right now in somewhat of a very Don Quixote moment. Goldman Sachs just came out this week and said, small business has the lowest optimism rating in 42 years. During COVID, 40% of all African American owned businesses closed permanently. Mm-hmm. So if you have a 1% formation rate and 40% of that 1% close, you're talking about a wipeout of any escalation opportunities. So seeding that and seeing that, and then teaching the code of wealth creation that honestly elite business schools teach and wealthy families pass on sometimes, is what we tried to codify to bring to the children of the poor to help them.
And how would you seed that in those communities among those kids?
You'd go to where they are. So we ran programs in unair-conditioned basements of housing projects of New York City Housing Authority. We went into Crenshaw and Compton in LA and worked with gang intervention specialists. We went to a place called Robert Taylor Housing Projects in Chicago, which is so terrible that it was ranked the highest teen murder rate in the country. And we found a fascinating insight. It was like Dr. Dobriansky,
long-time TFAS
perspective. And again, this is fun for American studies.
Yeah.
Dr. Judd's insights, but there was a thing called captive nations.
Yes.
And in that lens, I saw all these deep cycles of poverty and areas of poverty as captive people. And the good news was 90% of the people didn't want to have badness happen. 2% is sociopathic, that like either God or the law have to take care of them. And the other 8% can go either way. That's kind of what I saw time and again across Europe, in Ballymun Towers, and Easterhouse, Scotland, the two most notorious housing projects in all of Europe. I saw it across America. And then I saw it throughout India and other low-income areas where you have deprivation and lack of knowledge. So the whole thing is, if you go back to what is wealth, and it's spiritual, intellectual, and material, we always talk about material, and we talk about cost of living and kind of cash and non-cash benefits that actually are about $42,000 a year aggregately. No one talks about how do you create a company that can get you $50,000 so you don't have to do that anymore. How you can exit. So this kind of no exit survival strategy was necessary. My grandmother, as a widow with my mother, was on widow's assistance. So I'm not saying don't help people survive. I'm saying we need to build in pathways to survive and then to thrive.
So when you work with these captive areas and you get to young people there, how do you get them excited or interested or knowing about how to go about starting a business or being an entrepreneur?
It's very, I just got back from a presentation at Georgetown University, which is a Jesuit business and McDonough Business School there, premier school. And they talk about the importance of reflection and self-knowledge and discernment. So the entrepreneurial process is very inward-looking. You can't do something you don't believe in and love and are passionate and have purpose for. That's the reason why 70% of adults hate their jobs, is they're discoupled. They're decoupled from
Their
that
passions.
and their why. So we spend a lot of time on their why. Like, why are things important? What is important to you? And as a young person, we know from entrepreneurial research it takes 10 years to get an insight from a business point of view, to percolate, to get setbacks, to keep trying and testing. And so every single person has lived experience that could take a pain point, in particular, living today is a challenge across all areas, but living with no resources has more challenges. And so when you take those pain points and those scars that young people have suffered and you flip them and say, what have you learned from that and how can you change it? And so there was a young man called Keontae, and he loved sneakers. To this day, he's had a company repping and dealing and being the sneaker man. We had a young man, Jimmy Mack, who was a BMX bicycle athlete. He created the first multicultural BMX racing team. It just goes on and on.
So these kids actually started their own businesses.
They all started their own business
through
and
your help.
Yeah. So Nifty reached through a network of 4,000 teachers, built on a model called Nifty University, replicating the fund. Because I took the idea of the institutes, bringing teachers together, training them, certifying them, and supporting them, and we had created 4,000 teachers across 14 countries that has reached 2 million teenagers that then could each reach another 20.
Yeah.
In the kind of the law of proximity.
Yeah.
The law of proximity.
Multiplier.
You can have a great multiplier.
So I know you did some other things we hopefully will have time to talk about, but I want to jump ahead now to your current work with GCSEN because it's fascinating. It builds on things you've been learning, both as a self-taught person and as a executive of Nifty. And but tell us about the mission of GCSEN, and then I'd like to talk some about social entrepreneurship, which
Absolutely.
is a type of entrepreneurship,
Right.
which maybe a lot of people aren't familiar with.
Absolutely.
So.
And just as we have the experience economy for consumers, we've been doing a lot of work on the learning experience. And we are in the business on a great day of life-changing learning experiences through the use of social entrepreneurship. And social entrepreneurship we define as an entrepreneur who acts with purpose for a quadruple bottom line: people, profit, planet, place. It's really common sense. It's really good. It captures the intent of the 17 UN Development Goals. It captures the intent of the stark sustainable community chart, which is an 8x8, 64-box grid of metrics of a sustainable city or community. It captures CSR, ESG, IDE, MFE. It captures all these real recent conversations. And I could never have done that without having the fund experience, with having had the support, without having those models and inspiration, the mentorship of Walter Judd, who was the chairman, every 6 months, just blowing my mind with his journey of life. And then by being able to look at a crossroads at different times in my life and choose helping people help themselves versus another path, I was able to then kind of find my entrepreneurial journey, find an entrepreneurial journey to help low-income teenagers. And then Harvard Business School found our work, case studied Nifty twice in its growth and scale. And due to a fellowship I got from England, the Norfolk Charitable Trust, and the Gordon Cook Conversations, which has been going on since kind of Henry VIII time, I was selected to be sent around the world by a philanthropist to observe firsthand why cities are thriving or dying. Unbelievable. 14 cities, 14 weeks, 4 continents.
Wow.
Just incredible.
Was this something you did with a group?
This is something I did with 4 other people selected from England. So I was the only Yank. And we would, leave London and show up in Beijing, leave Beijing and show up in Johannesburg, leave. And every place had strengths and gaps. And every place had teenagers. So I was like, wow, there are low-income teenagers around the world. And we're doing something cool, and people are like, I want to do that. So that's how this kind of the openness to these fellowship opportunities led to the discovery of a market opportunity globally for Nifty. And after 20 years, and Harvard case studied me twice, I started to go on a kind of a graduate school business lecture circuit. Spoke with Professor Greg Dees, who founded the field of social entrepreneurship at Harvard, spoke at his class when he moved to Stanford, spoke at Babson College, and then was asked to create social entrepreneurship programs for Babson College in 2004, which I did through the founding of GCSEN.
Is just so people understand this concept, is social entrepreneurship by definition connected to a not-for-profit, or can you define because there are companies that would argue that this people, profit, planet, place is their mission, but they're for-profit. They have a bottom line.
I think it's a false debate.
Okay.
I think really do.
Yeah.
I think people there's 16 forms of legal business structure.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of a false debate. There are nonprofits that are highly profitable. There are for-profits that are not profitable.
Right.
And there are for-profits and nonprofits that have profit or no profit. So that debate kind of is a specious debate, in particular for young people who say, well, I don't care about money. I just want to help people. Now, Mother Teresa and her organization were quoted as saying, no margin, no mission. So they had to know something about positive cash flow to cover the nuns all over the world doing good work. So this integration, we're more of a unitarian approach to this, that make your organization, whether it's a for-profit, nonprofit, more accountable to a higher accountability of 4 Ps, people, who are you serving as customers, who are you hiring, what profitability are you generating, and how can you sustain that fairly and create that value in exchange of wealth, voluntary trade, and then how can you steward the environment? I think stewardship of the environment is responsible. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
And then most importantly, how can you build the local economy back? And how can you create the local economic multiplier, which is the future of millions of lives if we don't figure it out?
Okay, so I won't press it any further, but I think I understand it as kind of all entrepreneurship is social.
Because they
obviously,
and so
it's
my
about
first
creating
conversation
value.
was social entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Oh, you do social media. That was the first thing. You do entrepreneurship in media. I'm like,
Yeah,
okay, we
you
can
do
work with that.
entrepreneurship.
So the second thing was, well, all entrepreneurs are sociable. They're very socially oriented. They talk to a lot of people.
Most,
That's not really where we're going on this. And it's really it's helping the companies of today and tomorrow be more visibly connected to their stewardship of their own ethos, their culture, and their impact.
Well, one person I've talked to about this is John Mackey, the founder and CEO of Whole Foods, and he wrote a book called Conscious Capitalism, and turned it into an organization on conscious capitalism, and I think it captures a lot of this.
Yes.
I don't recall that they use the word social entrepreneurship, but it's about the responsibility of a company toward its workers, toward its customers, toward its shareholders, and toward the community it operates in. So I think very consistent with the kinds of things you're talking about, and along the lines of.
And we have a deep, almost a Hayekian individual method belief that everyone, over time, over 4 or 5 decades, which most of our students in college today will work till they're almost 75, based upon what's happening right now, that they'll probably have 3 to 4 business ventures that they could create, should they choose. And we just want to give them the choice. But if you don't know you have a choice and you're afraid, and that fear is a liar, and fear keeps so many of us in chains to even try.
Sure.
And so you have
fear
to build
of failure.
a fear of failure, fear of success, fear of being different, fear of stepping out from what your parents might want you to do. There are many students who are, it's a seeding process, just like the fund. You don't know who's going to become a Mark Levin until Mark Levin becomes Mark Levin, And so that's the thing that we have to invest in, or you'll have the opposite. You're either going to build stuff up or you're going to burn stuff down. You're going to burn stuff down if you don't understand how hard it was to build stuff up, if you don't understand the value of building stuff up.
Yeah.
And the other insight, just from conversations with a number of strategic sponsors, was this concept that There are 20 million college students in America today across 4,000 campuses. 2.5 million are business school students. So it is quite possible that 17.5 million are functionally illiterate, if not antagonistic because they're illiterate. And then you go around the world, there's another 4,000. So if you look at the resources poured into this elite percentage of population globally, you're talking less than probably 2% of the entire 18 to 22-year-old population ever get this chance. That gifted population has the least knowledge of how to create a bigger opportunity for everybody.
So you've worked with lots of people I know at a number of universities. I know you've worked with Babson, with Marist, with Wheaton College, Lemoyne, and I don't know if it's thousands of students at least, and you've done this internationally, of course, and in other ways, but many of them have gone on to be very successful entrepreneurs, I take it, and created businesses out of the
we do annual
your
surveys,
mentoring.
absolutely,
Yeah.
and we do pre and post program, and in essence, their confidence jumps by 50%, partly because, and largely because it's achievement-based self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
They've actually gone through a beyond MBA rigorous business model build and pitch deck and prototype and market ready, market entry prototype. Of our surveys, we find that 90% consider the event, just like the fund was for me, a life-changing event. 90% would recommend it to others. Our net promoter score is like positive 9.3. There are companies today with like minus 9.3. And one of the most fascinating things is if you give us 100 college students, a normal class with no intervention, you'd have maybe one business. Without this higher framework, start 1 out of 100 today, max. Mm-hmm. And we're finding we get 10 to 15 out of 100 right in college. But the big play, we're finding 70% of our students want to do a social venture within 10 years. If half of that comes true, we're talking about transformation, and especially in communities of need. But so it's a real farming strategy. I used to think it was more kind of, as Dr. Judd taught us. He said, if you want to plan for 1 year, plant corn. If you want to plan for 10 years, plant trees. If you want to plan for a lifetime, plant men and women of honor. And so I came to the realization that we're kind of bamboo people farmers. It takes almost 7 years to percolate because the students have debt from college. The colleges don't really give them an off-ramp to monetize and pay off that debt quick. So they need to get jobs. And then they need to work on their social venture. And that's why we have lifetime alumni support, which almost no university in the world offers. So we have a network of college graduates from across colleges to have some place to come to.
I should interject here for those who don't know. Walter Judd was a trustee and regular speaker every summer at our programs. So Mike and I both had the opportunity to hear him as students. But more importantly, he served as a member of Congress from Minnesota, Minneapolis area for over 20 years. And prior to that had been a medical missionary in China at the time the Japanese invaded. Remarkable man, influenced me, influenced you. And there's a great biography of him by Lee Edwards called Missionary of Freedom, which perhaps you can still pick up on Amazon. Just a strong believer in freedom and the ability of individuals to run their lives and overcome problems and be successful. So,
and for those concerned about our present day and future, he did lecture, and this is from 1978. I remember the rise and fall of civilizations.
Yeah.
And then I just saw a quote yesterday that immediately linked to that, where it said, "Nations die by suicide, not by murder."
Right.
And so, coming back from Ireland off to Fulbright, I got a chance to see 800 years of conflict kind of dealt with in some ways, and in the last 70 years of the Troubles. And what I saw was an arduous effort to overcome sectarianism. And what I see today in America is political sectarianism at an alarming, accelerating rate. The only way you can engage is through enlightenment and through education. That what takes, for another academic partner of us, is Vassar College. Takes a school that's very social justice oriented with no business department and help people understand how to use the market to make the world better. That's powerful stuff because most, again, come in indifferent, antagonistic, and ignorant. And that's a very bad combination.
Well, congratulations on this Fulbright. Let's talk a little bit about that. You were selected for this, as you've said, to go to the country of your grandparents' birth.
It's a miracle.
And
there were 60 countries in a screen, and I was matched with Ireland.
Yeah, and you traveled all over the country and maybe some of the 6 counties as well. But talking about entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship.
I was based with the Atlantic Technological University of Letterkenny in a county called Donegal. And ironically, that's where my parents left. And I didn't really even know.
Grandparents?
Grandparents,
yeah.
And didn't even know that. And so I was able to see the points of departure, the actual Bridge of Tears, where when the family knew they couldn't survive, they would put their youngest children on a 5-day walk to Londonderry to take a boat to America. And you never see them again. It's unbelievable. And the fact that I can get to that bridge, through sponsorship of U.S. Congress and the State Department, and bring American ideas, and really just timeless ideas of enterprise and individual initiative, is something that was very humbling and wonderful to do. So Atlantic Technological University was my host. I had a chance to meet with presidents of universities across the country. 3,000 kilometers of jiving, 6 cities, Dublin, Galway, Belfast, Letterkenny, and Killarney. So covered the whole country and saw great prosperity and creations of jobs. And the next wave is to create local ownership of that prosperity. And so Ireland has the top 10, it's ranked number 10 in the world for education. It has the youngest employment force. Incredible engine. It's the only English-speaking country in the EU now. So there's a whole bunch of opportunity. The big thing is they have to start local economies again, because that could be not good over time. So, and plus they also have a reunification effort, which is going to be something we're targeting as well. Like, how do you engage people that have been alienated during these years of sectarianism to engage in a future that's worth building and working for peacefully?
Yeah, well, I want to ask you a little bit, Mike, to reflect based on your career and your experiences on, advice you might give to young people today who are growing up obviously in a different world than we grew up in. Challenges are different. Technology has come so far. We've had 2 years of kind of the pandemic and it's the lockdowns and the impact that's had on young people, which I think has been real impacts. But the students coming to our program today versus, I think, to some extent when you and I attended, are very serious, very career-oriented. They're here saying they want to kick the tires of different professions to figure out what direction to pursue. What kind of advice would you offer a young person who's entering the last few years of college and kind of uncertain about what to do with their life ahead of them? Can you offer some advice that's generally applied?
Sure. I think you start with the simple but lifetime challenge of self-knowledge. Like, who are you really? Who does somebody else say you are, but who are you really? And why are you here? Like, if you can struggle with that and then start to screen things out, you can get closer to your joy. And we call it get to wow. Mm-hmm. Aligning the 4 spheres of who are you, who am I, why am I here, what do I know and what do I need to know, what do I need to go get, and how can I act on it now? Oxford University Scholl Institute there just came out with a major study that this generation of college students have the greatest gap between confidence and action. So the confidence has gone down, and the chasm to action, micro wins, small wins, anything, is very small. So I would say that's the first thing. Self-knowledge, ask yourself those questions. We can, happy that we can do a Zoom chat, and have a global conversation about this with all the alums or whatever. The second is, it's something I just talked about yesterday for the first time, is, what color is your shirt today? Now, again, I wore an orange golf shirt that had a GCSEN logo to this conference that I spoke at. And it was why did we pick orange as a foundation? And it was the orange means generous, optimistic, opportunistic, and bold. What color is your shirt? Most young people they have to take at least a portion of the credit or the burden with their choices of how people have spent their time in what I would call non-purpose driven social media days, every day for the last 10 years is, what color is your shirt this morning? Is it generous? Is it isolated and self-doubting? Is it optimistic? Or is it pessimistic? Is it opportunity? Are you looking for something to do differently, better? Or is it fatalistic? Is it kind of just given up? And then is it bold, or is it wounded without permission, without confidence to cross that bridge? That darker shirt, or what other color you want to call that shirt, that's something that we all have. And you need to really challenge that, because most of it is a myth. Yeah. And it's a collective psychosis of, I think Tucker Carlson called the worst of it narcissistic self-loathing. We're not happy, we don't like ourselves, and we don't know why. Yeah. And part of it is because we're not on purpose with how we can do more for others to make the world better, and give greater glory to either their own spirit or their God, however you define it.
Well, that has a lot of profound applications, what you just said. I think that alone made our conversation worthwhile today. And you see it not only individually as your own directing force in your life, but as a nation, I think we no longer understand what it is we are. And that's that sectarian divide. We have debates over our founding. Is it a founding in glory and a belief in liberty for all men are created equal and that we have rights from our Creator, or is it the 1619 narrative that we were founded by people trying to preserve slavery and that we should have be embarrassed about our founding, and we're divided over that, and so we see it collectively as well as individually, and I think that's a great perspective you just offered us.
Yeah, every nation that commits suicide is destroyed by almost fratricide. That it's self-inflicting because it's manipulated. So I would just posit who's informing you, who is using your time every day, and to know that you need to get going now, like this afternoon, and you need to build your capacity. So I went late in life. I think I was in my mid-40s. I went and got my MBA from Bethel.
That's not late.
Yeah. Well, it kind of was. Everybody else was like 28. But I had been an entrepreneur, but I wanted to go back and see what was the number one school in the world doing. And I want to get behind the curtain. I want to see how faculty taught. I wanted to see. And in essence, I took 23 courses. It's cost $300,000, 2.5 years of my life. But I got the code. And they need to get strong, and they need to get strong in practical efforts and practice, and they need to understand the importance of customers, of valued products and service, of finance, self-finance growth versus this, mirage of VC bubble growth, which we're seeing the collapse of everything now, because it's not real. And then team. How do you build a team and a culture? And as we're getting to the point where we're kind of now giving lectures on impact CEO mindset, and it's like, well, what is that? Like, how do you do that? You have to have a clear accountability, the 4 Ps, people, profit, planet, place. And then you have to understand, what is your culture? And the culture that we have at GCSEN is, family and health first.
Health, family and health
first. Personal health and family health first. And family, whatever happens, it's personal and family health first. Then it's together help each other succeed. Something very opposite of Lord of the Flies and kind of and Shark Tank. It's almost countercultural to say, let me help you succeed today. I mean, it's like weird. It throws people off. But if you get into an abundance mode, guess what? They'll help you succeed. 9 out of 10 times. And then the third is get to wow and fix the ow fast. You're not perfect. It never will be. And in this area, in this great gap between confidence to action, the fear of imperfection is almost stultifying. It's just debilitating. I've been coaching a young lady who was bullied in middle school, who got herself through middle school. She developed trichotillomania, which she removed all the hair in her scalp and eyebrows and really scarred herself. Got through college. She took our program, and she's starting a anti-bullying program for middle school students now, taking the pain to make a gain, if you will. And it's taken her 6 years to give herself the steps. And so that's why you have to be patient with the evolution of each spirit. Like you can't straight line this stuff. And over time, things will happen. And that's if you will, faith and hope and love. You either buy, and charity, you either buy into that, or you do have a pretty good one-way ticket to nihilism and despair. Yeah. And it takes as much work, and it's less fun. Yeah. That's what I've found. It's like, why not be optimistic? Because being pessimistic takes so much work too.
Well, yeah. Well, Mike, thank you so much for sharing at least some of your story with us today. I wish we had time to go into more because you've achieved a lot. You've helped so many people in your career. It's great to have a conversation here and remember the people you mentioned, like such as Lev Dobriansky, our early director of our programs at Georgetown, Walter Judd, a great American and a member of our board, Jack Kemp, who's had a great involvement with this organization during his life and his career, and I was Mr. Optimism, and Dave Jones. So
and we got to mention Randy Teague, who's just been like an enduring lighthouse to keep us coming into safe harbor, to have a home to come back to with the TFAS.
That's for sure.
And keep us off the rocks.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, it's been wonderful. So thanks. Thank you for listening to the Liberty and Leadership Podcast. Please don't forget to subscribe, download, like, or share the show on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you like this episode, I ask you to rate and review it. And if you have a comment or question for the show, please drop us an email at podcast@tfas.org. The Liberty and Leadership Podcast is produced at K Global Studios in Washington, D.C. I'm your host, Roger Ream, and until next time, show courage in things large and small.